Hello and welcome, everyone. Happy Thursday, your pre-Friday to your Friday. My name is Hayden, and I have the honor and privilege to be your moderator today. I'm excited to see how today's topics won't only assist you in your team in taking your SharePoint environments to the next level, but your business to the next level as well. A few things to mention before we jump in. First, you may have noticed that when you joined, your mics are muted. That is by design. So if you'd like to ask any questions or have any comments during the presentation, we do encourage you to utilize the QA chat feature in your toolbar, where our team will be able to reply to you in real time. Once the webinar concludes, we will then be moving into a live QA session. And at that time, we will allow users to unmute and ask questions to our team. And those questions don't only have to be about what we covered today, but any of your 365 environment questions. But we'll go over that in more detail later. Also, our next webinar will be on October 30th. So look out in your emails for that. We'd love to see you again. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Michael to give you guys a brief message. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Aiden. Hey, everyone, and welcome to all dataBridge clients. And for any guests out there, I'll give you 90 seconds on what we do and why we do it on these webinars. We do about 10 of these a year. Microsoft consistently rolls out new features across Teams, SharePoint, Stream Planner, AI, Copilot, you name it, that whole feature set. And we noticed a few years ago that clients, after maybe implementing an intranet for them, they were just unaware of these features, right? So what we're going to do 10 times a year is highlight some of the new things that have come out. For example, today you'll have the first two presentations are things that you or your users can implement. They're business user centric. They can go do these almost immediately. And then the third session and some of our sessions throughout the year will be more of an educational period. We're going to talk about SharePoint site management policies today. And this is a huge topic, but so many people we see, they think, okay, let's lift this up and put it in the cloud and I'm good to go. And there really is some thought process and decisions that need to be made, and Ken's going to take you through that. So what you won't get here is a bunch of sales stuff on us, this, that, and the other. We jump right into it. I'm going to hand it back over to Hayden, let him go through the agenda today. If you need any help, you know where we are.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. Yeah, as you can see on your screen now, we do have a jam-packed schedule, wider range of topics, and we do have a couple of new features that we're excited to show you that's being rolled out. To start us off, Katie is going to be showing us the new SharePoint header and footer enhancements for the SharePoint site. That's right, there are updates to SharePoint's headers and footers. Katie will show us how these enhancements empower site owners to create visually compelling, brand consistent sites that improve navigations and layout flexibility. This is actually a huge deal. Sorry for being a little geeky here. This is great. So definitely pay attention on this one, and we'll explain why later. Evelyn will then go over the brand new watermark feature. Now we can apply watermarks to PDFs both within SharePoint and in OneDrive. Evelyn will show us how this feature works so your organization can enhance document security, compliance, and branding all in one. Last but certainly not least, Ken will then teach us about site management policies. Whether you're a SharePoint admin, an IT manager, or a business user looking to bring more structure or governance to your digital workspace, this topic is definitely for you. And as Michael alluded to, very much so needed, and not just today, but as you continue to grow in the future. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump on into the first topic, SharePoint's header and footer enhancements, taught by Katie. Over to you, Katie.
Thanks, Hayden. Yeah, I'm really excited to show everyone this new enhancement that they've made. Previously, you would have to use a good amount of code in order to make any of these kind of customizations. Some of them you couldn't even do with code. So the biggest highlights of this update are that you can now use background images for all the different layouts for the headers. You could customize the fonts that are used in both the site title and the navigation. And there's new options for the footer as well. So without further ado, let's take a look at how that works. So here I have just a simple site. Right now, I have just a basic header, I believe in compact mode here. So in order to make these changes, you're going to come over to the settings gear and you're going to go to change the look. So we're going to take a look at the header first. So you're going to click on the header option here. So first of all, you'll see this new design tab. But first you could choose which layout you want. So previously you could add images to the background only to the extended header, but a lot of people did find that took up a lot of real estate. So now you can use any of the 4 header options. So compact or standard. So right now I'm just going to choose, make it a little bigger than that minimal and choose compact here. Then I'm going to go over to this design tab. So not only can you choose a lot of different theme colors now for that header, you could upload an image. So just simply clicking add an image here. I'm going to choose to just upload one. It's going to pull up my Finder here, and I'm going to choose this nice water image to kind of go with the theme of that site. So you'll see right away that gets added. You do have a couple of options as well. So they do provide you the advanced editing that you've probably already seen on image web parts or other image areas as well. So now, you can come and change the adjustments, crop the photo, change the focal point. Of course, with this image, changing the focal point isn't going to do much, but you can kind of see over on the side how that might work. You could add different filters as well and make any of those changes that you want. For now, I'm just going to kind of close out of this advanced editing option. You also have this overlay color option. So you could choose if it's going to be white, black, or gradient overlays. If you choose the gradients, you'll also get the gradient direction option. So you could choose if that's coming from the top to the bottom to the top, etc. This little sliding scale, what's kind of nice about this is that it automatically does suggest what would work well for that image. It's more easier to read, really. But you can kind of play around with that setting there. So another feature that is new is the typography for this. Right now, if I choose the drop down, I'm only seeing that default Surgo font that Microsoft's always had. So let me show you how to kind of change that up. So first of all, I'm just going to save the changes I've made. Of course, it's taking a little bit right now. And then if we go back to change the look, there's this font option. So these fonts are controlled through the brand center. But if you upload your own custom fonts through there, you'll have this from my organization option. So I could go ahead and choose the specific font that I want to use. And I'll go ahead and hit save again. So right away, you'll see that that site title changed to that new font. You can also, part of this new update in the navigation option, you'll also see that new design tab. So you could choose what fonts that navigation is going to be as well there. So I'm going to go back to the header options just so we could see some other options here. Of course, this is still where you would upload the site logo and the thumbnail logo as well. It's just now moved under design. So if we kind of go back to the layout here, you could see that that image and the fonts are going to persist regardless of what layout we choose here. So once you're happy with the settings for that header, go ahead and save them. The same kind of additions are added to the footer. So right now you can see at the bottom of my page, I actually don't even have the footer turned on right now. But we could simply do that by going back to change the look, and this time going to footer. We're going to just toggle that on. And we have the same two layout options that we always have, the simple and the extended. One of the big things that are new, I'm just going to go ahead and save this real quick so it'll pop up for us. But one of the big things that are new is that you can now choose what side the links are going to show up. It used to be that you would really only be able to use them right aligned. And a lot of people kind of wanted to make those links more left aligned. So now you do have that simple alignment option here. We have Zap up at the top. So we could choose, one of our theme colors, or we could upload an image. Again, you could change which that you want to show down here. And you could change the footer names. So right now, down here, but we could make this whatever we want. And again, if you wanted to add a logo to this footer, you could do so right down here. So I'm going to say for this page that I'm going to actually just go with one of these theme colors. But, I made sure that it's going to be left aligned here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. The layouts, like I was saying, are the same, where the simple layout, you're going to display one level of links or labels up to 8 columns. And the extended layout, you could display 2 levels of links and labels up to 8 columns wide. And as always, to add the links to this footer, you're going to hit this edit button, and you'll be able to add them to that footer navigation, just like any other navigation there. So just for example, we could add whatever we want there, hit save, and now we'll see it show up at the bottom. So really excited about these updates, because you could see it really kind of pulls the whole page together and adds a cohesive look to your brand. So we're really looking forward to see what other features and change the look option that SharePoint's going to be rolling out. But with that, I'll pass it back to you, Hayden.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. Yeah, Microsoft continues to roll out more and more branding options for SharePoint Online. If you've joined us in past webinars, you know what we're kind of talking about when I say that. It wasn't so long ago where you needed a ton of custom code for a lot of these features, which of course brings with it technical debt. And we never wanted to touch some of the code because, well, various reasons, but Microsoft pretty much told us not to in a sense. So these features allow site owners some freedom to enhance the user experience while still remaining brand consistent from site to site. It's a win across the board. So I can't wait to see what designs you and your team implement in the near future. And with that said, let's go ahead and move to our next topic of today, which is taught by Evelyn. Evelyn is going to be teaching us about how to apply watermarks to PDFs in OneDrive and SharePoint. Over to you, Evelyn.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Hayden. Today, we'll go over the new watermark feature for PDFs that you can now use in your OneDrive and SharePoint libraries. You can now easily add text or images to your PDFs, and once you apply them, those watermarks will be visible in other PDF tools. So that's pretty exciting. And once they are on those PDF tools, they cannot be edited or removed outside of your OneDrive or SharePoint. Now, this is a great feature to use ad hoc. Think about running your sales documents, presentations, or the need for marking high sensitive content, invoices, confidential, do not print, etc. So let's see it in practice. Now, whether you are in your OneDrive or your SharePoint library, if you navigate to your PDF documents, when you preview it, you can now easily edit your documents and add a watermark. Now, whether you select a text or picture, if it's a text, you can enter that here. Let's say that you can do something like that. I always like to add a number of those. And once I enter the text I want to have display as a watermark, I can decide to change the color of that text, whether I want it bold, italic, change the size, the transparency, and rotate this text. Let me try that one more time. Now you can also change the position of the text, whatever you like it. And lastly, you can decide whether or not to print this watermark whenever you decide to share or print this document. Now, once you have made those changes, you can go ahead and apply that watermark and preview this document. Here, you can decide to either add a second watermark, so you can have multiple watermarks. You can edit that initial watermark by going back into here, or remove it altogether. Now, if I decide to make some changes, and now that I'm previewing it again, I like what I'm seeing on my page as my watermark, I can go ahead and save this document. And now this document has been stored with the watermarks in place. And then you can see that here. If I access the document one more time, then you'll be able to see that there. Now, let's say that you want to add an image or a logo to your documents. If you open the same or a different PDF document, once again, you go to Edit, Watermarks, and then you add that watermark, select a picture, Add. Now in here, you can decide to either upload a logo or an image from your computer, or navigate to other locations where you may have those images stored already. Here, whether you choose a logo or an image, you can select it. And then once you go back to the page, you can scale that image to your liking, apply transparency, and then rotate that image as well. Select a position where you like it to be displayed. And again, determine whether or not the watermark should be visible when printing. Apply it to preview it, and then I can save this document. And if I decide that I want to see what that will look like in other PDFs or print this document, I can do that from here. I select print. It will open up in other PDF tools like Acrobat in this case. I can see what that will look like here. I don't have the ability to edit this anymore since I'm outside of SharePoint. But if I print this document, this is that preview of that print. and then you can see the watermark in place. And that is how easy it is to apply watermarks to your PDFs now. Now, a couple of things to note here. They are important for you to know is that whenever you add, modify, or delete a watermark, a new version of that PDF is being created in SharePoint or your OneDrive, whatever is stored. Also, you and anyone who has edit permissions in OneDrive or SharePoint will be able to make modifications to this PDF. So that's important to know as well. And last, these watermarks are a great addition or a complement to highlight your sensitive content, but it should never replace your sensitivity labels. So that is it for today. Thank you. And back to you, Hayden.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evelyn. Yeah, whether you're managing sensitive documents or looking to reinforce brand identity, this feature offers a simple yet powerful solution. I did see in our QA chat, someone asked if we can do multiple. Ken answered that, but some of you may have realized that this feature works kind of adjunct to sensitivity labels, which are more policy applied. So if you need to do multiple documents or a whole document library, that's perfect for this. This feature is more manual. However, it's perfect for ad hoc needs. If you just need a singular document or anything of that nature. A few use cases include, of course, sales documents, right? Whether quotes or presentations or other sensitive information the sales team may send to a client. That would work really great here. Or accounting team, if they're sending out invoices that are paid in full, is another great use case. So think of internal stored sensitive documents probably need to be secured by a policy, and then documents that are ad hoc or sent out to external users, this feature would work really, really well for that, especially since the users in your team, as Evelyn said, can edit or remove watermarks. They do have the same edit permissions or higher for that document. So it's usually best case for more external focuses there. But speaking of policies, let's go ahead and move on to our next segment, which is taught by Ken, who will teach us all about the site management policies within SharePoint. Over to you, Ken.
Great, thanks, Hayden. So as administrators, we have a couple of things that we always need to stay on top of. Two of those are ensuring that our sites don't go stale, and that content is continuously refreshed, and that we have the proper governance on those sites. Adjunct to that is a compliance need to occasionally attest to content and content access. So the compliance need may not be applicable to your industry. The industries that I have worked in depth, financial services and healthcare, both have a compliance need for attestation that your staff have the minimal level of security necessary to do their jobs. You don't want people having overshared access to content. And we also need to attest to things like policies or standards or procedures to ensure that they meet the training needs of our staff. At the end of the day, the engines that you have at your disposal in the policy tools are really a great way for you to stay on top of these needs without having to manually go in and ask the people, can you tell me if this is content that's good to go for the next year? Two of those features that we're going to look at today allow you to look at sites for staleness and look at, do you have the proper ownership and administrative staff counts in your sites? Both of these are pro features, so you will have to pay an additional fee. I never like to quote the fees because they always change out from under me, but generally speaking, I think it's around $3 to $5 per user. It is per user, so if you have a large organization, this can get quite expensive. But if you have a large organization, you probably do have these compliance needs, and you probably benefit from the fact that you'll be able to then pass your audits in a more clean fashion if you're able to point to these as the automated tools helping support you. At the end of the day, the tools themselves are very easy to manage. You can access them by going into the SharePoint Administrative Console. So you can see an example here of what it would look like. You can go to the lifecycle management feature here, or you can go into advanced management. If you go into advanced management, it will give you an English description of various tools that are available under there, and you'll see here site lifecycle management. In either case, you'll be taken to the area where you'll see the inactive site policy management tool and the site ownership policy management tool. This is a zoom in of those areas. We basically can look at, from a standpoint of inactive sites, setting a time goal, say 3 months, to go out and look to see if the site's been touched in that time. You can include or exclude sites. It has a very good scoping capability. You can look at it by template, so you can include communication sites only, for example, or team sites only, for example, so that you can scope what you're looking at. You are limited on the inactive sites to 5 concurrent policies, so you'll have to decide exactly how you want your management structure to be so that you can have full coverage. When I work with my clients, I always go in and take a look at active sites, and I'm always surprised that, relatively smallish companies will have 100 or so sites. So it's very easy to have site proliferation be a problem. Part of that is due to some of the defaults that your tenants are set to right out of the gate. Users have a lot of control. If you have edit capability, you can spin up new teams, you can spin up new sites, and that's a problem because you're growing organically then and you're not actively managing your content. But if you deploy the inactive site tool, you can then get those reports so you know what sites to go after to determine whether or not that content needs to be either archived or potentially deleted. You also then have the ownership and administrative role management tools. So one of the policies that most large corporations will deploy is that sites have to have a minimum of 2 owners and usually at least a primary and backup site collection administrator. The third role, which is kind of an adjunct role on the team sites, which are the site editors, members of the team groups that are associated with team sites will automatically be added as members. They will have edit. Edit is a minor administrative role. They are not included in this. So if you also have policies around that, those have to be managed in a more manual state. So when you're configuring the policies, this is the site ownership policy settings here. You have a very simple set. This isn't like the sensitivity labels, which can get very complex because they have a business rule component. These are very linear. So you'll determine who's responsible for managing the sites, either owners or admins or both. You'll set a count that you have to have. Now that is a total count. So you look at, I need 4 staff across the owners and admins to be able to do the job. And then you set the count to 4. You then have the idea of notification, so who gets notified so that they can claim the site for responsibility. You can send things to everyone who is a member of the site, for example. You can send things to current site administrators, and you can send things to people who in the past have been linked as owners. So this works really well for staff who are still in your Active Directory but potentially have changed roles. But unfortunately, if somebody leaves the organization, all you're going to get here is that a site potentially is no longer under control because the 2 people who were owners have left the organization, and so you effectively have a count of 0. You could take various actions to either do nothing, in which case it's just a notification, or you can do an enforcement action. The 2 enforcement actions that they give you are to either set the sites to read only or to archive the sites. The recommendation on the screen is to archive the sites, but I never like to take an action like archive or setting things to a read only unless I know that content isn't under active use, because just not having owners on a site doesn't mean that content isn't being actively used. And remember, this is the site ownership policy, not the site inactivity policy. In the inactivity case, having the read-only setting is actually very powerful. But the archiving setting you have to be careful with, because while it is a non-destructive act and you can get that content back, it does go into the cold storage. And by going into cold storage, getting that back can take you a week or so. There's no SLA that I'm aware of that Microsoft commits to, but roughly a week is what they put on their literature. So be aware that if you were to auto archive content, you may have unhappy users for this particular policy, which again is the ownership policy. You have similar settings on the inactive site policy. This one is a time-based policy. You set how long a site should be looked at for inactivity. By default, it's 3 months, but you can set it for longer. You then notify the people who are in the various roles of either owner or site collection administrator that something needs to be done about the content. You can then choose to either do nothing and let the people that you're notifying take the action that they're going to take, or again, you can put an enforcement action in place. In this case, doing the read-only access enforcement action is potentially a good idea. Now, setting the site to read-only does leave the site online, so you're still paying the full, I think it's 24 cents per gigabyte cost of that content, whereas archiving it does lower your retention costs. But again, you don't have that cold storage wait time if the site actually is under active use and is being looked at periodically. So if you have a site that is potentially only accessed once a year, thinking about open enrollment for HR, for example, you might have that site remain available all year, but it's probably going to look like it's inactive. The other thing to be careful of is that you do not want to overscope this. There are often sites that do not have a lot of activity. They are accessed in terms of potentially people looking at things, but very rarely. So if you have a business continuity or disaster recovery site, for example, you may only do something with that site once a year or once every other year, depending on your testing policies. In that case, you would want to exclude that site. And again, this has a very powerful scoping feature. And so depending on the template that site was provisioned on, if it was a communication site, for example, you could exclude communication sites, or you could exclude that site by itself. There are limits to how many sites you can exclude. I believe it's 100 sites, if I remember correctly. But you can exclude sites, and you should exclude those which are going to trigger this so you don't get the false positives. They should still have proper ownership. So the other policy, I would not exclude them. I would make sure they have proper owners. I would make sure they have proper site collection administrators. But in terms of the content itself going stale, that content is not meant to be under active use. And that's different from a team site, for example, where you would absolutely want to have this, be something that you would monitor. And I think 3 months is actually probably a good time period to see if those team sites are in active use. If they aren't, then you would have a discussion about either merging that content, archiving that content, or just, shutting the site down completely. So there's a third feature which is coming. It is not available right now in general preview. It's only available in private preview, and that feature is an attestation feature. So that will be added as a third policy cluster. The attestation feature has not been fully described from a scope perspective, but what I have seen is that you will be able to ask people to attest to the site content, to external access controls, to permissions, and to a couple of other areas which are usually your compliance areas in terms of who should be able to see what's on that the content is still fit for purpose, and that external access is under the level of control that you expect it to be under. Those attestations are fairly tricky to get right, and it's a fairly deep area with a lot of overlap with the other two functional areas. So I can see why Microsoft is taking their time, but we'll stay on top of them releasing this. And as soon as it's available in general preview, we'll go ahead and include it in that month's webinar so that you can see it. And then you can decide if you want to begin to adopt those policies as well. So that, again, if you're in a highly regulated industry, you can use this as a means to help pass your audits, because you have yet another automated control mechanism, which should really help you in terms of, again, the idea of, is this content good? Are the people who are accessing it supposed to have the level of access they have? And I have my external access under control. So with that, I will hand things back to Hayden.
Awesome, Ken. Thank you so much. As organizations continue to grow and rely more on Microsoft 365, it is crucial to ensure that your SharePoint environment remains organized, secure, and scalable, right? That's where strong site management policies come in, and the best time to implement them was unfortunately yesterday. But the next best time is today, right? Especially since out of the box, team members with edit rights are able to spin up some new sites. And of course, you have that tricky Microsoft Teams channels that create sites that trip up a lot of new users to it. So just being able to keep everything in check and organized goes a long way. A couple of use cases, if you go up to your SharePoint admin portal and go to active sites, that'll show you how much data your organization has used. And so if you're close to that, or you keep getting emails from Microsoft that you're running out of data, policies like this is perfect to look into. Or on that same active sites, you can see, last activity column, and you can filter by that to see if there's any older or maybe even abandoned sites that would be perfect for the inactivity policy. And then last but not least, project-based sites. Having a site that you want to retain the information, so you don't want to delete it, but maybe it's no longer active, policies would be perfect for that as well. So thank you so much, Ken, and thank you all presenters that shared today. I'm going to show on my screen now. We are going to be moving into the QA form. Before I do, that does conclude our learning portion of today's webinar. I hope we've been able to spark some new interest for functionality, especially with those new features that you and your team can explore. Please be on the lookout in your email for the next webinar, which will be on October 30th. We look forward to learning with you again. Before we segue, I want to remind everyone that all the webinar notes, slides, and recordings will be put on our learning portal for easy access for everything discussed today for our SharePoint support clients. If for some reason you don't have access or you'd like to gain access to this learning portal, please reach out to us after the webinar. Our learning portal is where you and your team can get all the materials, not just from today's webinar, but any future webinar recordings and materials as well. Okay, with that said, let's go ahead and segue into our open live Q&A forum. If you don't plan on staying for the live Q&A, I just want to say thanks again for learning with us today. On the screen, we're showing instructions on how to raise your hand to ask questions to one of our presenters. Your mic will be unmuted and questions will be taken in order of hand raised. As a friendly reminder for this live Q&A, we encourage any question about M365. It doesn't have to be just the topics spoken about today. Also, I know I love to talk, right? But maybe someone else may not like to unmute their mic. We can still use the QA functionality, and we'll answer you in real time there too. So with that said, does anyone have any questions? Well, we got a hand raised for Erica. If someone can unmute Erica.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey.
Oh, hi. So my question is, with the new environment of SharePoint in general, you've got the SharePoint sites and you have teams. Metadata is really becoming popular, and I've been around a long time. I've used the typical filing structures that I would have had in my Windows file manager in the SharePoint environment. So for example, if I was doing financial reporting, I would show the year with subfolders underneath it that have one for each month, and then in each month there would be relevant reporting and so on. So with enhancements with metadata, AI, and things like that, do you guys have recommendations on best practices as far as the filing structure? Does that best practice include, is it important to have naming conventions? Is there best practice for what metadata you actually use to associate to files and things like that? It's just a really big shift. And I was just wondering if you guys had like detailed training on that, or at least provide a quick level answer of what what your ideas are on that.
Great question, Erica. I'm going to let Ken answer this shortly, but a quick thing really fast. Best practices really depend on the organization itself. We can point you in the direction of best practice tools, right? And some things that will definitely help you jumpstart your metadata journey. I do think that metadata has quickly become from a would like to have to a need to have basis, especially with the SharePoint Online and all the features and functionalities you were talking about. And so I'll let Ken answer a little bit more in depth about it really quick.
Yeah, very good question. We are seeing an uptick in people's interest in this area, and I think it's because they're starting to see the power that SharePoint brings to the table. SharePoint is under the hood a very large database instance, and what that means is that if you have the metadata, things like search get supercharged. If you don't have the metadata, search still works, but it is not as powerful as when you tag your documents. So as far as best practices, Microsoft is 100% clear. Do not use subfolders with the exception of two use cases. One is there is a smart folder, and they do recommend using the smart folder. The proper name for that smart folder is a document set. It's incredibly powerful, and it is nothing like its older cousin. It has all the features of the older cousin and then dozens more, including things like automatically setting metadata. So it's an incredibly powerful tool. Microsoft highly recommends using it and has been modernizing it along with the rest of SharePoint. The second reason that you might use a subfolder is for permissions. So security management is an area where inheritance allows you to have the folder be a security barrier. So you could set security at a subfolder level. Everything you put inside that folder inherits that security. It's a very easy way for you to then manage what you're doing with the documents. You don't have to micromanage the content or have separate libraries. You can have everything in one space and still have everything be secured to the group that should be working on it. That's very common in project spaces, for example, where the project financials might be in a secure folder within the project folder. We see that all the time. The best practice around the metadata columns themselves, again, as Hayden said, very industry specific and very company within industry specific, because the best practice is use the language that resonates with your users. So there are, certain terms of art in your industry, and using that term of art as your column header, for example, and the proper values in the choices that you offer your staff are absolutely important. But the two huge takeaways that I would say, and we're absolutely happy to help consult with you on this, are you're going to want to manage at what's called the tenant level wherever possible. That's going to ensure consistency across all of your SharePoints, and you're going to want to leverage a technology that's called content typing. So it's the very first metadata value you should begin to think about, is this idea of what type of content am I managing? This is especially critical in the document management space, because you'll want to think about, do I manage contracts, and do I manage invoices, and do I manage procedures, and do I have policies, and so on. And so having a clear understanding of the type of work that you do and the documents associated with them is job one. Once you have those, you can then discuss for each one of those what additional metadata might be important to me. So for a contract, for example, you might want to have the counterparty, the effective date, and the total contract value as columns that are searchable and can be used in a view, so that you don't have to open each contract to see that information. You can just see it at the view level. So that's my 3 cents on how you can use metadata. And again, we're absolutely happy to consult with you and help you reach your goals in that regard.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Erica. Any other questions?
I do have one more question if I can ask.
Sure.
So, obviously the environments are changing in SharePoint and Teams. This metadata, not needing, layered and tiered folder structure, all of that's changing. And so, or it has begun to change. So, our current environment, we have, everything in kind of like the legacy look, right? And we want to start moving people over and I've noticed some things in the environment that there's a big difference between copy from the old SharePoint site to the new versus move from the old SharePoint to the new. And there's been some permission issues carrying over. And I just wanted to know if you had any recommendations or thoughts on that, because, you know, move data versus copy data has had, you know, can have meaningful impact as far as like the permissions of the docs and things like that. Is there best practices on how to like move things over with a clean slate and protect the environment?
The best way, and the way I recommend, but I see Ken wants to jump in, is definitely a migration tool if possible. Because that captures all metadata. You can make sure security is good to go, that everything moved over exactly as it needs to. There's no errors or issues there. But aside from that, there are some other things to consider. But Ken, did you want to throw in?
I was just going to say that it depends on the context that we're talking about. So for migration from outside of SharePoint to SharePoint, Hayden's exactly right. You're going to want to use a tool. And again, we do have an offering to help you with tool selection and helping you plan out your migration project. But within SharePoint itself, there is a critical option, which is the link option. And I want to make sure people are aware of that. So you can have content appear as if it's in 2 or 3 or 4 libraries simultaneously, while the source of truth remains in one library. If you leverage versions and you leverage this linking feature, you really only ever have one source of truth. And you can blend the security model for versioning itself, which allows, excuse me, both major and minor versions, and the ability to show documents as if they appear in a library, but actually just be linking to them in their source library. Combining those 3 features allows you to eat your cake and have it too, without having to have users have any kind of issue with not being able to access or work with the content.
Thank you, Ken. Awesome. Thank you, Erica. I see a hand up for Liz. If someone can unmute Liz. And while we're unmuting you, Liz, it looks like we had a question in QA. We can. Hey, Liz.
Thank you. I kind of have similar question like Erica. So we are in the last phase to transition all our file server to SharePoint, but we ran into some situations that some departments had already sites in SharePoint.
Yeah.
So, and we have a critical department that has shared files in their SharePoint site to externals, which is critical for the day-to-day work. So nothing is compromised as far as we know, but we were told that at the moment that the old SharePoint site, we need to move or migrate those documents to the new SharePoint site. Those links needed to be redo and shared to the externals or whoever we share it with. So, and I was wondering if there is a way that we can transition that without with the minimum impact, so that if this is hundreds of links of files that people need access to, so that they don't have to go one by one and redo it just because we move them to a new SharePoint site. Is this a way to find out what's being shared to run a report in the backend of SharePoint, or that we move them without having them to send again a link because they were moved to a new site?
That's a great question, Liz. And I'm going to let Andrea or Evelyn answer that one, if one of you guys want to jump in.
Moment. I don't know if Evelyn, you can answer that one? Evelyn, you are muted. I know you're muted, it looks like. See if we can unmute.
Yeah. Unless we may need to follow up with you after the webinar. But the question pretty much is there an easy way to pull a report to see what's been shared out, or a good way to transition that those documents without breaking those links so that there's no need to go back in there, if I'm understanding it correctly. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
There is a new site permissions report that is in development. It's coming very soon. There's multiple ways to actually do this. You can do these reports with a tool or with PowerShell, and then there's also the Compliance Center where you can, do reports. So there's multiple ways. It just depends, on the effort that you want to put into it.
Okay, but then there is a way so that we see what currently is being shared from the old SharePoint site, so that because okay, so there is a way. Okay, so that's one of my main questions. Thank you, Andrea.
Yes, for sure.
And the second one, it's we were told that an existing SharePoint site that might not have probably all the compliance requirements and security requirements in the back end. Can an existing SharePoint site, it's able to be integrated as is to the new environment, or you always need to create new SharePoint sites and move everything from the old one to the new ones? So is there a way to adapt it, what is existing, so that we don't have to redo them, or the work that they have done? Because many of them already designed the SharePoint and the shortcuts and, sharing documents and all that. But when you create a new one, so it's kind of, they need to redesign it and bring kind of like, they add their own touch, right, to their sites. So is there a way to adapt an existing one, and including all the security backend patterns to make it secure, or it's kind of something that you need to do, start over, moving from the old one to the new one?
Yeah, and you don't always have to start from new. It just depends. It's hard to answer this question without really knowing what you have. If you're trying to, upgrade from a classic UI to a modern, you can do an in-place upgrade. It's not a full one. You're going to lose some features by doing that, but you do gain the ability to not have to start from scratch. If you're wanting to do new hub and spoke structures and you already have those sites in modern, you can certainly just join them in, and you don't have to create new, but you get to organize them in the navigation, and also you get that search scope when you start joining two hubs. So again, it just really depends on, we'd have to take a look at what you have.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you please can do a follow-up with me, I will appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. Really quick,
I'll reach
not
out
sure.
to you, Liz.
Sounds good, Michael. Real quick, last question. I see a Q&A, Rosalind. I'm not sure if you're still here, Rosalind. Hopefully you are. If not, we'll follow up with you afterwards. But what is the recommended process for assuring access is correct across the tenant before implementing Copilot? That's a great question. I'll let anyone answer it as you need to. We normally always recommend starting smaller than larger when it comes to Copilot, and you can set up agents that point to direct documents you want people to be able to search in, and that way you only need to check and assure that those document libraries are the security's set up correctly and ready to go there, instead of doing maybe a more broad Copilot approach. I do believe there are ways you can pull reports or policies to check access, but it will be a lot of work on your end, so just know that going into it. Is there anything else anyone else would like to add to that from our team?
Just real quickly, I would do a combination of what Ken just shared on, so that you can, identify what you have, make sure that, because you can exclude some sites from AI, obviously, do that audit, and get your owners, involved to say, okay, what kind of content is this? Get a good understanding of all of your sites. And then, I don't know if it's going to be next month and maybe November, we're going to be doing a topic where we're going to show you this new feature where it does actually give you the prep steps for to do before deploying AI, specifically for that scenario that you asked for. I'll check again on the roadmap. I checked it this morning. It's not quite, ready, but it is going to be something that we will all need to look at. So that's a great question.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrea. Any other last minute questions? We got about 5 minutes, but we'll stay as long as you guys need us to, within reason, of course. But any other questions that anyone has? Okay, Erica.
Yeah, with regard to the metadata, if we were to deploy the metadata at the tenant level across just all of the sites, so that the metadata that we've pre-selected apply to anything in any environment within our entity's SharePoint environment, right? But if we do it that way, are individual sites still able to add additional metadata on their own for their specific sites? Or if I choose to do it at the tenant level, it's tenant level only?
Yeah, so the people who have what are effectively designer or editor level or above rights will be able to add additional columns. That's not considered best practice, though. And the reason for that is that it is extremely common for somebody to start off with one SharePoint site and then decide they need a companion SharePoint site. And the second that you do that, the tenant level objects can be deployed instantaneously and they'll stay in sync with each other. But if you have something that's been locally customized, you have to manually do that local customization on the second site, and then on the third site, the fourth site, and the fifth site, and so on. So the idea is that you would manage things that you want to have from a top-down structure approach be managed through your tenant level architecture, because that will enable you to keep things in sync no matter how many SharePoint sites that team wants to use. Because the use case that I see quite often is they'll want a standalone team site, then they'll want a project site, then they'll want a site specific for a given client, and so on. But they want the architecture for the metadata to be the same everywhere and to be easy to maintain. The tenant level architecture gives you that. But if you manually adjust it, which you absolutely can if you have designer, editor, or above, then you have to do that manually everywhere.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you, Erica, for another good question. This is great. Any other questions? Erica again.
Sorry. So with regard to the AI and Copilot, did I hear you say that you're going to be sending out some more information on that and maybe doing a webinar? Because this when you open up AI too broadly, as you described, I would want to make sure that if somebody ran AI and they said, what is the census information for the company? That if they didn't have permissions to that data, that it wouldn't come up, right? It'd be produced in that Copilot question. So this is an area that I'm sure everyone on this call is going to want to know about. And I'm hoping that you guys will deep dive into that and maybe even offer services.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll introduce it. The rollout starts in October. We always try to wait and see, if a couple of our development tenants are seeing it actually starting to roll out, because we don't want to highlight anything too quickly, because then you guys have to wait, to see it on your own tenant. But basically, what it's going to do is you're going to be able to, using Copilot skills, in the SharePoint Admin Center, it's going to kind of give you a step-by-step task guidance so that you can, put in there, like, for instance, you want to find sites that are over permissioned that was kind of, or shared externally. You can actually do this now with the AI model, and it's not only going to find those sites for you and give it to you in a report, but it's also going to make recommendations of what it found and then how you should remediate. So it's going to be really cool, and I'm really excited to put it on the webinar, and I'm really hoping that it does happen in October. If it does happen and we can put it on the October's webinar, we'll do that next month, but it may be November's.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you again, Erica. Any other questions? About 30 seconds or so. All righty. Well, we appreciate all the questions. We appreciate the activity today. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this webinar, and we look forward to seeing you next month as well. So thank you. I hope you guys have a great day.